Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a sequel of a previous lesson from the 4th chapter in the book of Proverbs. We made it all the way up to the 13th verse. We're going to take it from 14 all the way home to 27, and we're going to start backwards but work forwards for our review today. It all makes sense as I do it. So we're going to start with our review with the 10th through the 12th verses, which read, "Hear, my son, and accept my words, and the years of your life be many. I have taught you in the way of wisdom. I have led you in straight paths. When you walk, your steps shall not be hindered. And if you run, you shall not stumble." So he's talking about his path, the covenant path, the way of wisdom, the way of Yahweh, where we obey the will and word of Yahweh is a path of lightness. But what he opens to describe is the path of darkness, the path of sin unto death, and we're going to explore that trajectory from the first two chapters. Then we're going to cover the fourth, review the material we already covered in this lesson's predecessor. So as early as the 10th verse in the first chapter, Solomon writes, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not go in." 15th verse, "My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep their foot from the path, for their feet run to evil, and they hurry to shed blood." So their path is headed towards nothing but trouble, and you got to stay away from that stuff. They'll flatter you with these tales of how exciting and grand their ventures will be, but just don't pay attention to it. Don't get sucked into it, because they're headed for trouble, and eventually and inevitably they will ensnare themselves in their wicked ways, because wickedness is a web which ultimately traps the one who laid it. This is continued in the 12th through the 15th verse of the second chapter. "To deliver you from the evil way, from the man who speaks perversities, those who leave the path of straightness, to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice to do evil, they delight in the perversities of evil, whose paths are crooked, and they are perverted in their ways." So the path of wisdom will deliver you from the evil way. That's what it would make more sense if we started earlier, but it's too late now. Discretion will guard you, understand you, will watch over you. This will keep you and guard you and protect you from falling into the way of the path of the wicked. And these people are the people on this path. There are some sinners who are so sadistic that they rejoice in doing evil, and they praise it and just love it and live it, and they truly delight. They take pleasure in the perversities of evil. So there are people on this path, and their paths are crooked and they are perverted in their ways. So they have no guidance, no direction. They're heading into their own trap and their own destiny of doom. And then we're going to review what we earlier covered in this lesson's predecessor, the 4th chapter. It's a wisdom proverb. The theme of there are 3 themes in the first chapter. The first is the purpose for which it is written, which is in as many words for wisdom. And then there is exhortations for wisdom. The section we covered from that is in that section. Then there's wisdom call. Wisdom is personified in female forms. It's she. And pay attention whenever you hear that word, her. That means, but it's also capitalized, so it is a divine entity, and it is either sister or mother or wife to, it's actually an emanation from God himself. So God is bigger than wisdom alone, but wisdom is certainly one of his attributes, and we want to stay away from the mind maze of gender ideology, which it just has gone to unnatural and unnecessary extremes in postmodern culture. The ancients weren't obsessed with gender the way we are, so we got to try and stay true to them. Second chapter, the theme is the moral benefits of wisdom, and then the 3rd chapter continues on that, speaking of the additional and further benefits of wisdom. And then the 4th chapter praises wisdom's supremacy, and that's we're going to start with verses 5 and 6. "Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget, and do not turn away from the ways of my mouth. Do not leave her, and let her keep you. Love her, and let her watch over you." So in the 2nd chapter, we already read that discretion will guide you, understanding will keep you. Wisdom performs much the same function here, and the wisdom are in the words of his mouth. So, don't take them lightly. Don't let them go in one ear out the other and miss the meaning and miss the lesson and miss the usefulness. You have to, if you love her, you will never leave her. And and if she will love you back. The beginning of wisdom is get wisdom, and with all you're getting, get understanding. Exalt her and let her uplift you. She brings you esteem when you embrace her. So the foundation of wisdom is the pursuit. Without the foundation of wisdom, you have to keep expanding that, or else it's going to crumble from inertia. So if we don't exercise our mind to and diligently seek more of the same, we're going to lose what we have. This message is communicated in the New Testament in reference to Revelation. But if we exalt her, then we will be exalting ourselves. She will exalt us in a way that we could not possibly imagine, and we will have splendor beyond measure if we embrace her. Now, we already covered the material, which got the verses 10 through 12, so we're going to open with the 14th verse, 4th chapter of Proverbs, lesson itself. Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the ways of evildoers. So why is this even necessary? This seems obvious to us. Stay away from evil, stay away from bad. Well, when wickedness shows up at its front door, it actually confuses a lot of people to think that it is good. And just to, Socratic Platonic philosophy was that no one does that. Moral failure was an intellectual failure. So the thief steals in the mistaken assumption that it will make him happy, and that is making the world better, but it's only making his world better. But the temptation is omnipresent. The world is in the web, in the path of the wicked. There's wicked people on the web of wickedness literally all around us. So we have to be mindful and pay attention. And, this does not absolve us of the evangelical responsibility to reach out and win souls of the lost sinners that God places in our path. It is only to say we should not succumb to their traps and their devices and their ways and their ethos. Stay away from it all. Avoid it, do not pass by it. Turn from it and pass on. So don't even go near it, don't avoid it, don't touch it, don't look at it, just stay away from it altogether. Stay away from it as far as possible. Now, we will see wickedness in the world in which we live. It's inevitable and inescapable, but we should not succumb to its sirens, and it does speak, it does tempt a lot of people. Even the wise are not immune to the world's wickedness ways and often do succumb to that temptation, but it could have been avoided if they just stayed away altogether. And we live in a day and an age when you don't have to go looking for trouble. Trouble will find you right where you are and will take you to town, and you'll just grow from there. So in previous generations, people actually had to go looking for troubles. Our trouble is never as far away from the cell phone in our pocket. Hold fast. Do not. For they do not sleep unless they have done evil, and their sleep is taken away unless they make someone fall. So these sadistic sinners have trouble getting sleep. Micah describes it in the introductory verse of the 2nd chapter in the book which bears his name. These people who stay up all night and they can't sleep until they hatch some new form of evil. These are the same breed of sinners. And compare that and contrast that to David, who could not sleep, knowing that the Ark of the Covenant, did not have a home. He couldn't bring himself to sleep. So there is what I remember when Bob Marley was shot, and he performed concerts so soon after being shot, and he said, if the forces of evil and destruction, I'm paraphrasing here, never take a night off, why should the cause of peace do the same? So he kept fighting the fight for peace even though he had been shot. And because evil does not rest. That's the one thing we got to be mindful for. It makes people restless, and it does not rest. For they have eaten the bread of wickedness, and they drink the wine of violence. So they have an appetite for it, so that's why they're likened to eating and drinking. So they indulge and are sustained and get satisfaction from wickedness and evil, and just doing the wrong things at the wrong time to the wrong people, and they're not necessarily any more wrong for anyone else or at any other time. So I might have misspoken for that. We're just going to move on. But the path of the righteous is the light of dawn that shines ever brighter unto the perfect day. So the path of righteousness comes in to form the antithetical juxtaposition between the path to be avoided and the path to embraced. It is as the light of dawn. If we walk in this path, we will have guidance, we will have vision, we will have sight, we will not stumble, because in the darkness we have no light, we have no guidance. We're just operating without the essential bodily function of sight and the sensory detection, and we do have spiritual capacities and appetites which are likened to senses. Paul speaks of the eyes of faith that we walk by in contradistinction to the eyes of sight that the world walks by in 2 Corinthians 5:7. But it only goes brighter throughout the day, so the path of wisdom gets better, that shines ever brighter unto the perfect day. I don't know if I read that, but in case I didn't, I just did. So the path of wisdom, the covenantal path, the straight and narrow path to salvation in the New Testament, it's not going to get easier automatically right away, but we will have brightness, we'll have vision even in our pain, and we can find joy despite our circumstances, and taking comfort and relief in the one who transcends all circumstances. The way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know at what they stumble. So it returns once more to the way of the wicked. They are in darkness. They are spiritually blinded. Satan blinds the minds of the entire earth. We read in 2 Corinthians 4:4 and Ephesians 2 something. But, the way of his path is the way of disease, death, and sickness, and just evil, and it only grows worse, and it only gets darker. So they are operating without the light, without the guidance, without the prompting of the Spirit, and they are stumbling, and they don't even know what it is. So because the darkness of their ignorance, they don't even know that there is a light. They are comfortable and prefer the light, and this brings to mind to revert to Platonic philosophy once more, Plato's famous allegory of the cave, which I'll simplify it as concisely as possible. A prisoner is bound at a cave, and when that's all he knows for all his life. He's only seen the cave in the darkness, so when he sees the light, it's going to be unfamiliar territory. He's going to be more comfortable in the darkness, and we can connect this to John 3:19-21. Sinners prefer to operate in darkness, and the night was actually a time where it was the prolifically dense time of criminal activity in the ancient world and perhaps in the modern. My son, listen to my words, incline your ears to my sayings. So he's already said this twice in as many words in the material which comes before the material we're covering, verse 1 for reference, and also verse 10. We already read that one, but so what he has to say is important, so he's asking him and telling him to listen and to gravitate your ears to what I have to say, because what I have to say is important, what I have to say is useful, what I have to say is beneficial and will be a blessing in your life that will enable you to extend the blessing of others. So the path of light doesn't exist for our sakes or ourselves alone. We are to lead others in the light. When God puts a lost sinner in our path, we have to make the most of the opportunity to evangelize a lost and fallen soul, because I hate the fact that hell is even necessary. I hate the fact that most of the people in the world are heading there. I just hate it. So I have to do something about it when I see someone who's in need of spiritual services. I just have to reach out. I hate the fact of hell. I hate the devil. I hate sin. I hate it all. We have to have, it's not unchristian to have hatreds. We often overemphasize the love aspect and miss the balance of what our duties are, because, the one we worship also hates certain things, which are listed in Proverbs 6, for example. Let them not depart from your eyes. Keep them in the midst of your heart. So the eyes are the physical sensor which engages the word. That's what registers and perceives the words, but it's in the heart where it's truly processed and truly transformed. So the eyes are the intermediary between the words and the heart. It must reach our eyes before it sinks into our heart. It's just the way it is. And keep them there. Don't let the million and one an infinite number of distractions distract you from treasuring it and keeping it in your heart. These words of wisdom, for they are life to those who find them, and healing to all flesh. So life and health are two things no one could deny. Life is paramount. The natural man is survival oriented. So we all want our life, and Christians should not force the martyr's call. They should embrace it if they are so asked. But we value and treasure our lives, and we can affirm with Paul that to die is gain, but to live is Messiah. And healing, this isn't just physical healing. There is spiritual wounds and scars that require healing, and the doctor's medicine can't do it, so we have to step in and be spiritual surgeons and doctors. Watch over your heart with all diligence, for out of her are the sources of life. So the heart is the center of will, volition, attitudes, motivations, everything else. What we feel in our hearts affects profoundly what steps we take, what thoughts we have. It's a lot of, our emotions do affect our actions more than we think. We like to think they're all the process of reason, but we are. So to keep an eye on your heart, that means don't let anything get in there. Keep the bad stuff away. Keep the pollution out of there. Keep it pure. Keep it untainted. Don't let any temptation or anything else allow sin to establish a beachhead in your heart, because once it's there, it advances inexorably forward. So one of the consequences of the born-again experience is a redeemed heart. We cannot look at sin the same way, but we still are creatures in the flesh, and our flesh is unredeemed. So within our flesh is a glaring point of vulnerability that Satan will attack, and if you're not aware of it, you're already defeated. Turn away from you a crooked mouth, and put perverse lips from you. So stay away from people who are vulgar speakers and just don't have the right words. They don't observe standards of manners or decency in their language or words, because the words we speak are a reflection of who we are. So when we speak words, we present ourselves, and if we are perverse or crooked, if our language is perverse and crooked, then we are perverse and crooked. If our language is uplifting and healing, then we are uplifting and healing. If our language is hateful and destructive, then we are hateful and destructive. So a lot revolves and hinges upon the words we use, which define our character, and we want to keep that intact all the way. Let your eyes look forward, and your eyelids look straight before you. So look forward. Forward is the way of the path. The path is forward, so don't look to the side, don't look to the left, because broad is the path to death and damnation and destruction in the New Testament, and the way of the sinner is the path of darkness. That's the same thing. It leads to the same destination: death, disease, hell, and eternal torment, with the hell part. So keep looking forward, keep your eyes on the mission, know the destination of where you're headed, and pray to continue to get on that destination, and don't allow yourself to get distraction, because distraction is one of the weapons of the devil. I think I did one recently entitled Defeating the Devil's Devices, and I had 5 literary formulas, the final one of which was distraction, but their destruction, deception, and 2 others, but who cares? Consider the path of your feet, and all your ways are established. So the path we walk on determines the life we live. We can live the life of righteousness unto salvation, or we can walk the path that is broad and and wide, which leads to nowhere good. But all your ways are established by the path that you choose. So if you are on the path of darkness, that means your days in life and afterlife will be spent in darkness. But if you are on the path of the straight and narrow, the covenantal path, whatever you want to call it, then you are headed home to heaven. Do not turn to the right or the left. Turn your foot away from evil. So when evil rears its ugly, pathetic, unwanted head, you got to stay looking forward. Do not turn to it. Do not embrace it. Do not even acknowledge it, only in as much as it is unavoidable to say, get out of here. Not today, Satan, is a valid word from the Spirit that I've used in the course of spiritual warfare. A word from the Spirit is not necessarily limited from the Bible, though it most often is, but sometimes it's just a word of truth that's not from there, and I've come to rely on not today, Satan. That's one easy to remember. So you always want to have a sword in the Spirit prepared in your mind for when temptation comes, and if you say, not today, Satan, in the strength and power and in the name of the Messiah, then it will not be today. He'll come back another day, but you'll have your victory. And it's just the straight and narrow path is filled with battles. We battle. The devil is literally trying to get us to walk away from the straight and narrow path to salvation, the covenantal path to the Jews, and he does all sorts of tricks and magics. We just got to stay mindful. Wisdom will keep us and preserve us on the path. So a Christian life apart from wisdom, I wouldn't recommend it. Where the slogan of the world is where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. But we don't have the luxury to not be wise, because we have a kingdom to build, a church to establish, and everything else. So I hope that's the reason you're here. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Take care until then. Bye-bye.